Are we live? Yes, excellent. Thank you so much for joining us. While everyone's kind of getting their cups of tea or glasses of wine and sort of settling down, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we're doing here tonight. So, first of all, I want to say thank you so much to the South Asian Heritage Month team, especially Ruby and Natasha, for creating this amazing series of events and providing this space for us. So this is going to be a launch really for our collective of poets who are called Kinara, which means border, shoreline or edge. And we'd love to do more readings. So if you're interested in having us read at your event, or if you're a poet who would like to come along and read at one of our events, do drop us an email or let us know. I think on the booking link, there's certainly all of our Twitter handles. So I'm going to introduce everyone as we go along, but being the moderator as well as a reader, I've got to start by introducing myself, which is always a little bit awkward and embarrassing. But basically, I'm Gita Ralleigh. I'm a poet, a doctor, and a short story writer. And I'm going to read two very short poems to just kind of kick off the evening. The first one is called Black Star, and to give you a tiny bit of context, it's named after a youth organization in the 1970s called Kalatara. And Kalatara was set up in Bradford really as a means of resistance against lots of racist attacks that were going on at that time. And they had a magazine and they would get together in sort of not vigilante groups, but kind of groups to sort of patrol neighborhoods and would also protest against the police's perceived inaction against the racist attacks that were going on. So this poem's called Black Star, and it was recently published in the Rialto Poetry magazine. Black Star. Hail to the Lashkars! Arise, ayahs, frail ghosts at the feast, their feet the first to alight, to trek from fort to forest, first to irk the khakis, kilts, and rifles, to forget the life of guts, key, railgari, leathers, lash, ashes, craft, and heat. Here's to heresies that risk the ire of oafish orators or fists of shifty foes. Reify the heroes, erase their grief and sighs. Let freaks gather, fakir, griot, artist, fighter. Let rioters shatter the ghetto gates. Let our hearts soar to astral rays. Let starlight hear the rift. Let's stake the right to shake earth free of hate's fetters. Hail to this isle's others. Lay a rose at the altar of their fate. Thank you. So that was just my tribute to all the kind of early arrivals in this country from the South Asian diaspora, who, as we know, from great work lots of academics have been doing, go back a lot further than we were taught when we were growing up, back to the sort of 19th century. The second poem I'm going to read, which I feel slightly fraudulent reading this because we did an Instagram live this morning to promote this event. And I was just saying that part of my impetus for doing this was, that there is so much more to our culture than Bollywood, Bhangra and curries. And poetry is a big part of, South Asian heritage. But of course, I'm now going to read a kind of Bollywood influenced poem. And it's called Love Equals Rain. And it's actually based on a pre-Bollywood era sort of movie which is called Shri 420, which stars Raj Kapoor and Nargis, and there's a very famous scene where they're kind of standing in the rain under an umbrella, and it's a weird thing when you explain it to people like my husband who's British, but in India rain is very romantic, and that's what this poem is about. Love equals rain. I learned that love equals rain from Bollywood, tinted silver and black. In those old movies, studio rain streamed down like an aria's final note. Violin strings strain to the heights of a soprano's voice, and under umbrella silk and the lights of passing cars, Nargis sings. Her face blooms in a lover's embrace. I don't deny, I thrill for the tabla beat of rain on the roof while lovemaking. Even the mizzle and spit of London drizzle. No monsoon here, too cold for saris. A black umbrella is made bridal canopy. Beneath it, our bodies collide, willing, Yesterday's words are undone, our foreheads kiss. In slick tarmac, the streetlights mirror sodium galaxies spilled at our feet. Thank you very much. So now what I'd like to do is introduce our next reader, who is the amazing Sarala Estrich. She's a British poet and writer of mixed European and Indian heritage. And her debut pamphlet, which is titled Say, will be published by Flip Die in October. And hopefully Ruby will be able to share some links with you in the chat to all of our books. But Sarala's, I did find a link to pre-order, so I hope you don't mind, Sarala. I've put that in as well. So now I'm just going to mute myself. And Ruby, if you could just highlight Sarala, please.
Hello. Thank you so much, Gita. And thank you everyone for being here. I'm absolutely delighted to be here this evening to share with you a couple of poems and to celebrate the launch of Kinara and to read alongside all of these wonderful poets. I'm going to start with a poem, a short poem, which is a list poem in 12 lines. And I'll just say a couple of things about the poem I'm going to read. I first began working on this poem shortly after the results of the EU referendum, fueled, I think, by the desire to unpack the notions of Englishness that were going around at the time. But more than that, I really wanted to explore and expand our ideas around Englishness, nationality, and belonging more widely. And a final thing I should say just before I read is that the final line of the poem repeats the word rose in 3 languages, Mandarin, Hindi, and French. And I should disclose that I'm not a speaker of Mandarin or Hindi, but it's important for this poem to include a range of languages, as you'll see, so I'll try my best to voice them. I research the origins of the modern rose and discover. That's the title, and I'll start. I research the origins of the modern rose and discover 1. She is a crossbreed. 2. Rosa chinensis, Rosa gigantea, and other species. 3. Including Rosa gallica and Rosa canina. 4. Of which only the latter is native to the British Isles. 5. The rest were shipped from China, India, France. 6. Etc., etc. 7. Flower with 1,000 faces, 6,500 tongues, 8. And almost as many names. 9. Ancestors estimated at 35 million years old. 10. To where does she return? 11. She becomes what she is. 12. Make way, gulab, rose. In 2019, I travelled to India with the support of an Arts Council grant to research my family history, as well as the wider relationship between England and the subcontinent. The next poem is one that came out of that trip, and the speaker in this poem is both me and not me. And the speaker is listening to a recording of her grandfather speaking about his life. It's called Grandfather Speaks via audio recording, and it opens with 2 epigraphs. The first is by Maniza Alvi. Family story, is it there for the taking? Is it mine for the taking? And the second epigraph is by Urvashi Butalia, and it goes, partition was surely more than just a political divide. It was also to use a phrase that survivors use repeatedly, a division of hearts. Grandfather speaks via audio recording. Winter, 1952. 3 years, and stepping off the train, he'd forgotten the sting of the Bristolian wind. Back home, he'd had his work cut out, scything grasses, clearing jungle to make home and farm for his widowed mother, younger brother, and future wife. He speaks with pride of how he baked each brick. Doesn't say why, at 21, he had to start from mud when his father had been a surgeon. Doesn't mention the other family home, abandoned overnight in that other country, which had once been the same country. Doesn't say disjuncture, rupture, severance. Doesn't say trauma of body, mind, heart. Doesn't say Punjab. Grandfather doesn't speak of all the things he believes he's left behind, but I've inherited. When a favourite poet says be shameless about your shame, he means this moment. He means me sitting with my grandfather's unspoken words in my ear and willing him to say them, though I know these words can never be spoken, not by him, speaking as he is from the other side of death. Thank you.
Ruby, this was so exquisite, and I really cannot wait until your book, which, just to remind everyone, is titled Say, and it's coming out from Fliptie in October. Absolutely exquisite poems. Thank you so much for reading with us today.
Thank you, Gita.
So the next reading is actually pre-recorded by Anita. Anita is very wise, she's wise, but she's also a prize-winning poet. And she won the Rialto Poetry Pamphlet Competition with her first pamphlet, which is called Dodo Provocateur, and it's a really daring and exciting book to look at. And she also has kind of let me know that she's got a full collection coming out in the spring of next year, which we're not allowed to give too many details of because it's still undergoing that kind of editorial process, but it's going to be amazing. So we're very, very happy to share her recording, which is the first video. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm sorry I can't be with you tonight, but it's such a pleasure and honour to be appearing alongside such wonderful readers, and also as part of the South Asian Heritage Month, and also as part of Kinara, because it's our very first outing and reading. So I thought I'd read a couple of poems. The first is from my pamphlet, Dodo Provocateur, and both are from my new book, which is out next spring. And please excuse my pronunciation. So about the first poem, when I was little and we used to visit India to see our relatives, my cousins used to talk about England, or London as they refer to it, as if it was some kind of magical place, even though I tell them it wasn't. So this is written in that voice. And also the poem references the Rudyard Kipling short story, The Man Who Would Be King. The Girl Who Would Be King. Is it English streets are paved with gold, Papa, where chaps sport bowler hats to hide their rice for dinner? Guess no one wears chopples but tower jewel heels that soar to heaven and their feet don't pickle. But there's no hullabaloos over pilfered mully or rapscallion cockroaches to flaunt buttons at me, plus no antsy-pantsy. May I squat in a red telephone box and pray to Doctor Who? They're not all bloody bastards like you say, Papa, you nincompoop. Mr. Kipling will give me a French fancy, then croon, Roxanne, you pretty princess. But I will call myself Joanna and eat jackfruit jelly with Eton litter. Policeman will give me fish and chips or clips on the ear. This is the fair play in England, says Mr. Mishra. What the dickens, Papa, will they think of me? Graham Greene and H.G. Wells and those noble and free, like the Queen. When we go to live there and shoo their monkeys off their ruddy faces, they might thank us. And so the next poem, just to let you know, is more serious and deals with issues of violence. Manju. Because he liked the toddy, because he twinkled for her, he beat her. Because he towered and she was a bird. Because he was soused and the kerosene cast to cook subzi exploded, it seems. And because her nylon sari of plum and curd kindled and flared, the thatch flamed like spath or deer, and the roof withered, he creased back her throat to see the sky. Because she laboured with filigree wrists of bone, a waist you could twist to feed her boys, because the littler pined to be an American rocket star, his head bent up. The rain came in, and she'd take his whipping, always again on her keloid skin, because through the gap in the broken hut, she saw only stars. Thank you. And thank you for listening. And I'm really looking forward to hearing the other readers.
Thanks so much. So Ruby, if you can make me bigger or not, because I just wanted to remind people quickly that if you have any questions, please do just drop them in the chat and we'll try to get to them at the end. Hopefully we'll have time. So don't be shy, don't hesitate, anything at all you want to ask us, that's what we're here for. So the next reader is the amazing Rushika Wick, she's a children's doctor, she's a poet, and she's an advocate for children's rights. And her beautiful collection, which is titled Afterlife as Trash, is out now from Verve Poetry Press. It's absolutely stunning. And Rushika is also really interested in the arts and the visual arts. And she's kindly shared with us a beautiful film poem, which we're going to watch first. And then after that, she's going to give us a short reading as well. So thank you so much. So the second film, please, Ruby, when you have a second.
Eyes are cellophaned from sleep. She is sipping green milk in a kimono, turning the pages of a new book. Men from the nettles blister about the colour of her mourning, her nails, with invectives caustic as new moons, rising on hot skin. They see veins like tiny skulls on her eyelids. Morning sun moves across the table in sequence, picking out a mortar, her crocus skinned hand, fallen sequins from a midnight shift. They watch her through the net curtain veil, whilst she observes light and shadow trawl across the kitchen floor, an underwater disco, hosting memories like sad fish from when the music was hard and people cried softly in the toilets in love. First lesson on Monday. Teenage boys are picked apart, unpeeled layer by layer, pale gleaming onions in magic light lying in dust. A great eye is chalked upon the board, the eye of a magnificent horse, and everyone is quiet now. Even the men turn back for home, where they will wipe their noses on dirt sleeves, unobserved.
Thank you so much for that beautiful poem, Rushika. And then Ruby, if you could highlight Rushika, she's going to give us a short reading now. Thank you very much.
Hi, can you hear me? It's such a privilege and pleasure to be here in this space with these other incredible poets. So I'm going to read a short poem from my collection After Life is Trashed called Blue Period. I find I'm getting off at the wrong steps to avoid the demise of my mother. I think about the video sent through. She's cross-legged on the floor behind a playhouse, nails painted cerulean, as modern as the day. I've always loved his blue period, she'd say about Picasso, Aztec beads bright in her ears, speeding through her town. She's playing on my nephew's toy keyboard, looks up, laughing at the camera. None of this makes sense as I imagine her billowing heart corseted by drugs, and how that must feel inside of you when you still have ocean nails. And I wonder what happens if you're young at heart for all of your life. What then? The next piece that I'm going to read is a very new piece. It's really a work in progress, but it's a hybrid piece, which I think sort of fits potentially this reading space. The on-off button on the electric shower may pop out when you turn it off. Don't panic, just put it back in. It might be okay, as I glued it back the last time he was there. It's raining in Stardew Valley. I can't recall the last time I felt like this, nostalgic about the present moment. The memory of a ferry at night, a lit-up balloon, an Anna Mendieta earth body. That button popped out, animated, telling me to turn right on my walk. The immersion heater only needs to be turned on for about 20 minutes. You mustn't leave it on for more than an hour. The sheep know. They reply, and the power of their collective mind is a partition. The intervals between cries are filled with tiny, wriggling boson particles of alterity, wild notes of teak decaying in humidity, bulging with salt return beneath the surface, scratching below, a breach when the surface is polished. A ghost did it, with her faraway rustling skirts on that island. A ghost did it, when my hand slipped, trying to untie a knot on the headland. The word ghost is last season's too loose clothing, all gingham prairie party and city farmhands. Remove my clothes and see how polished my skin is. Remove my skin and make my bones shine before they fall into a reading. The Chipotle Margarita is a good place to start with our Belgian friends. There is medicine everywhere, stuck between the cracks in the pavement and in saliva. The cafe reminds me of this cottage in its language of loved wood. The hot composter has been breached by vermin, so I just throw bones and fish skin into the brambles and just throw myself into language, hoping it will scar me so I can be read. There is a tower of poetics made of resin, pollen smeared, we lick in devotion. Every morning, I enter the cool chamber of 3 deities, air hung with incense. I wash temple flowers in a wire basket in the corner sink and place them in a silver bowl of water below the Buddha. A lamp is always burning in there, reflected in the bright green tiles, palm tree distillate. This medicine is too powerful. The cool white farm sink is a devotion. Clay is breached by false rains, and the space between worlds trembles. A rare event has happened in Stardew Valley. A crop fairy came and grew all my crops. The season was wrong. In fact, she was useless. Go away, I tell her. I want a primitive to tell me the truth, not a glamour, but she hovers there, a fierce meringue. Thank you very much.
It's absolutely incredible. So please do seek out Rush's book from Verve Press. Go on to introduce our next poet now. So Shash Trevett is a Sri Lankan Tamil who's now resident in the UK. and she's also a prize-winning poet. Her pamphlet From a Borrowed Land is published by Smith Doorstop, and the reading that we had for her launch was one of the most moving readings I've ever attended. So I'm so excited for you all to hear her now. So if we could just highlight Shash, and I will mute.
Hello, and thank you so much for inviting me to read here. I'm so thrilled to be here at the launch of Kinara, which sounds just fantastic. Right, so I write mainly about women and war, and sometimes about both in the same poem. This is a woman poem. I was Nama. I was known by many names and now by none. I was Naama, the pleasant one, mother to all creation. The hourglass gathered pace in my shadow. I was Emzara, Betanos, Parthenon. Wheat and millet swayed to my song. Around my feet grew common reed, papyrus sedge, and bulrushes. I was Haikal in Arabic. Through my mouth sun rose flowers, blue pimpernel, and yaknuk spoke a language of their own. Cumin and chamomile formed my veil. In Georgian, I was Ta'aja, a temple. Bitter herbs formed my seat. Out of my left arm grew olive trees, cypress and cedar of Lebanon. Red bush, date palms, and myrrh out of my right. I was Nemzar in Armenian. I knew every lace wing of every petal, every wrinkled bark, each sharp thorn. I twirled every leaf in dewdrops and hid a covenant in each rotund kernel. I was Emzara Noyemza, Noria to the Gnostics. The Babylonians called me Taitia. I was the sunrise of creation, the moon glow of eternity. In the book of Jasher, I was Naama, the pleasant one. Now I am known only as the wife of Noah. I write quite extensively about the civil war in Sri Lanka, the effect it has on the civilians. And I'm just going to read you two short poems. Things happen. When they pepper neighborhoods with imported mortars and expansive tank fire. When they go from house to house, lining up girls, women, and men in revenge or on a whim. When they shut down substations and impose curfews and travel embargoes so that market sellers face ruin. When people go unfed, unwashed, and scavenge for scraps. When they shoot blindfolded men in the back and take souvenirs of mutilated lives and hopes. When they rape girls and grandmothers and celebrate the hecatomb of their success, things happen and the world moves on. Like Sarala, a grandfather features in this next poem. My grandfather's house. There is moss growing in the bedrooms of my grandfather's house, green and sticky, staining the walls and the floor with shades of the sea. They climb, tracing intricate patterns around brown squares where pictures used to hang. The roof has fallen in. Water stagnates on a cushioned floor as disturbed bats circle, drawing the night in. The rooms are empty of all that was him. The doors have been locked, warped, and unwilling to open onto a tomorrow which does not contain him. It is 6 o'clock, and the mosquitoes gather noisily in rooms that once smelt of sweet margosa leaves. They are the music makers, the sum total of our dreams, the inheritors of rooms that reek and sweat in angry dismay. There is moss growing in the bedrooms of my grandfather's house, and raindrops sing a lament on deserted floors. Thank you.
So much, Shash. That was incredible. I actually had to just take a moment there, I think, to recover. And Shash's beautiful book is available now from Smith's Doorstop, and all the links are in the chat. And not to be too much of an auntie about it, but just to say that I know that Nine Arches and Bad Betty and quite a lot of poetry presses do run a bit of a sale over the summer. So you might also get yourself a bargain if you buy now. So moving on, we're going to have our star guest reader. And thank you so much, Rishi, for agreeing to kind of come and read with our collective. So you may have heard of Rishi because he is not just a poet, but also a critic, a reviewer, an anthologist, an all-round literary man about town. He's been published by the Financial Times, the New Scientist, and the BBC, among many, many others. And his first collection, Ticker Tape, and the book he's hopefully going to read from tonight, Saffron Jack, which is a kind of extended, I don't know if you'd call it a novel in verse, but definitely a narrative in verse, which is really amazing and interrogates so much about our kind of current moment. Are published by Nine Arches, but he's also just produced an amazing anthology with Malika's Poetry Kitchen, which is called, I think, Too Young, Too Loud, Too Different. Do correct me if I've got that wrong, Rishi. So Rishi's going to do an extended reading from Saffron Jack, and he'll tell you a little bit about the premise of the book now.
I certainly will, Gita. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And I'm just so happy to be here to help the good ship Kinara into happy waters this evening. And it's been an absolute pleasure to be in the presence of so much wonderful poetry this evening. I will read a couple of bits from Saffron Jack this evening, and just to show you that there is some sort of rounded thinking in the universe. This too is inspired by Kipling's The Man Who Would Be King, and it is a far more extended riff on his novella. And it's written in a certain style. So this first extract will give you a sense of what that style is and some of the titular characters' concerns. 1. You polish it every night. 1.1. No, not that. 1.2. The Crown. 1.2.1. Every night. 2. It's the only way. 2.1. A bit of spit and whatever is to hand. Sometimes just your hand. 2.1.1. What you are wearing. 2.2. It seems to do the trick. 3. Even at the end, you must maintain appearances. The trappings of office. 3.1. Otherwise, what do you have left? 3.2. Yes, it is only symbolic. 3.2.1. Yes, you are only symbolic. 3. Hello. The wonders of BT broadband. Shall we start again? 3. Even at the end, you must maintain appearances. The trappings of office. 3.1. Otherwise, what do you have left? 3.2. Yes, it is only symbolic. 3.2.1. Yes, you are only symbolic. 3.3. But it is what is left, what you have left. 3.4. And they're not taking that away. Not now. 3.5. Not yet. 4. You didn't think it would end like this. 4.1. But then no one ever does. 4.1.1. Divine rights and inviolate. 4.2. You get used to being told the position you hold is immortal. 5. By sleight of mind, you come to believe the same. 5.1. That you are immortal. 5.2. Because position and person are one and the same. 5.2.1. Is vested in you. Represented by you. 6. So they cannot ever touch you, no matter the screw-ups you make. 6.1. Because they are not mistakes. 6.2. They are whimsical unpredictabilities with a happy effect, keeping consort and court, mistresses and subjects on their toes. 6.3. It is not that you are never wrong. Who possesses the temerity or sheer bad manners to whisper that to you? 6.3.1. To your face. 6.4. No matter the pattern of choices, some sort of internal coherency can always be found. 6.5. A chain of logic that is clear and followable. 6.5.1. Even if followable isn't a word. 6.6. Even if it is irrational to the outside eye. 6.7. Even if it is irrational. 6.8. Because what does the outside eye know? 6.9. Blinded by the gilded edges of the caravan. 6.10. Always confusing the trappings for substance. 7. Not that the trappings are not substantial. 7.1. Or not necessary. 7.1.1. They are a feint, a distraction. 7.1.2. Be dazzled enough by the shiny. You won't ask why everything is only being held by a few pieces of tape and string. 7.2. Though someone comes along one day and says, 7.2.1, look, I can see some rust. 8. And then it is all over. So you sort of get the sort of feel for the type of character Jack is, and the paranoia and the megalomania that he labours under. And so, long story short, he decides that the present moment and present country that he is living in have become too much, and his answer to this is to run off to a war zone to start his own country where he can declare himself king of it. And this next section explains a little bit more about how he came to this idea. 58. With nothing else to do but look out of the wall, holding back the sea, you drifted. 58.1. You drifted to being younger. 58.1.1. Bank holidays at home, the rain, the inside, the couch, in front of the TV. 58.1.1.1. Hoping that instead of the Bond, whatever was left over in Disney's cupboard, there would actually be something else on. 58.1.1.2. Something interesting. Something different. 58.2. And this one time, there was. 59. A bang on the TV, a splutter into life, and then on it. 59.1. The man who would be king. 60. For it's a nation I shall make of them, with a flag and an anthem and a standing army. I'll treat with the viceroy on equal terms, and other kings and princes. And when I've accomplished what I set out to do, I'll stand one day before the Queen, not kneel, mind you, but stand like an equal. And she'll say, I'd like you to accept the Order of the Garter as a mark of my esteem, cousin. And she'll pin it on me herself. Oh, it's big. It's big, I tell you. 61. A jolly in the subcontinent. 61.1. When the subcontinent was ours. 61.2. No, theirs. 61.2.1. To be jollied. 62. To mad dog Englishmen, Short on high Victorian imperial boredom, long on chutzpah and capers, 62.1. Smuggle some guns into some country, 62.1.1. The Kafiristan job, 62.2. Then some cunning, some chance, some shooting, 62.3. And one of them ends up running the show, 62.4. The locals reckon he's the son and they all start bowing down to him, 62.4.1. Just like that. 63. And you thought, wouldn't that be bloody cool? Well, not just to be Sean Connery, that obviously would be bloody cool. But, you know, it'd also be cool to just control somewhere, especially somewhere when you felt that you've never fitted in wherever the where is you're from. And then have loads of people suddenly decide that, yes, despite the fact that you look different, sound different, talk different, and scare them with your guns and what have you, still, you're a better bet than the current fat nabob they have, who goes around taking their bread from them, their grain from them, their money from them, taking their wives and daughters from them whenever he fancies, with only a little bit of prompting and cajoling, a twinkling smile or two, which they understand even if they don't understand what the smile is saying. They take that and the guns and the weapons and the drill and the tactics and the confidence you've given them, and they surround the Fat Nabob's palace in a ring of chanting, heaving, determined bodies which won't shift. And if you try to sneak through, he gets sucked into a maw of flesh, like being sucked into a whirlpool. So the Nabob's got no other choice but to give in and throw his hands up, throw his crown up, and his queen up. And when he looks round at who to give them to, so he isn't torn into pieces the sizes of stamps with his fat head on them, and the crowd are growling and shuffling and getting ready to pitch sharp things at him, it's only when he looks at you with a crown in one hand, an imploring gesture being made by the other, and his eyes are watery and pleading and hopeful and hopeless and scared, and the crowd suddenly hush as they see where he's looking, and you suddenly feel your arm lifting and your hand reaching out, and you gently trace the band of the crown once round to make sure it is real, and then you close the whole of your hand around it and you snatch it with a jerk and look at it in the same way you looked at her when she slowly undressed that night in your room, and then before anyone can do anything, take anything away, you put the crown on your head, pretending you're not being reverential, but you are a bit, trying to be that cocky and cool person that all the people down there have been inspired by and now should be slightly scared of. And then there's a moment of pure utter silence, like you get at 4 a.m. when everything is still or dead, and then you're almost blown back by this gust of noise, this rush of love and fear and hope and expectations and dreams, all in this one blast, this one expansion of emotion. 64. Yeah, that'd be cool. 64.1. Yeah, that'd be fucking cool. Thank you very much.
Typing a comment, which I haven't finished typing, but what I was about to say was that was just such a tour de force. And when you read the whole book, you just want to be watching Rishi on a stage somewhere delivering the whole thing. You know, I imagine it in front of a kind of ripped up or sort of otherwise altered Union Jack, and it would just be such an amazing thing to see. So hopefully one day soon we will get to see something like that, which would be just incredible. So Ruby, if we could possibly have everybody back on screen again, and we're going to have, I don't know if there are any questions in the chat, but if not, I have a couple to kick us off with. I can't see any, Ruby, but I don't know if you're looking at a different screen from me. But while we're waiting, I'm going to start off with Rishi, that film poem was amazing. So what I'd like to ask each of you really, and such a shame Anita's not here, is if there were or if there is another medium that you'd like to do some sort of poetry collaboration with, whether it's music, dance, art or film, you know, what would you pick and what would you and why, basically? So maybe I'll just start off with Rishi, since we've just had Saffron Jack, and I definitely think that would translate to film beautifully.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to be able to get other people to play him basically, because I think he's, I can take him a certain way, but I suspect someone who is a performer will be able to do lots of things that are different. What I would really love to do is actually do some more pop music driven stuff and collaborate in that way, and just actually see what those overlaps are, because I was such an indie kid growing up, and such a a reasonable beathead as well. So trying to explore those bounds. I've done workshops in the past where I've just played music at people and just got them to write poems off the back of that, and I think there's potentially lots of great stuff that could happen out of that. So that's one of the things I'd like to do.
That sounds fabulous. Can I go to you next, Shash? What other artistic medium would you like to see combined with your beautiful poems?
So I've had a go at a bit of performance poetry, and there's a movement called Poem Brew, which is sort of akin to art brew, and spearheaded by Stephen J. Fowler, who is a really interesting artist. You should look him up. So I think sort of a live performance, but with a strong visual element, for me is probably an area that I'm going to move into, with making of things to go with it, with objects to kind of complement the performance. So I did a piece where I read some colour poetry and I painted somebody on stage, and that was the first thing that I did. And then I have a sort of prayer that is written out on a very long strip of cotton sheet, that is a poem, and that's for another performance.
Fabulous. That sounds amazing. I definitely want to see that. Shash, top right, what would you collaborate with?
I've collaborated with musicians, and that's been really good fun. But it's been classical music, so I could hopefully join Rishi and do something,
Jam session, yeah.
If not, I don't know, maybe drama. I'm not very good at anything creative. I can't draw, I can't paint, I can't sew. I'm really rubbish. So I'd like to see other people maybe doing something with it. It'd be quite nice.
I think that would be beautiful. Sarala, could I go to you next?
Yes, absolutely. I think, Rishi, we're going to end up with a band, because I want to I definitely want to do something with poetry and music, and just for me, just to sort of emphasize the rhythms of words, the sounds. It wouldn't have to necessarily, like, I'm just thinking sort of on the spot, I definitely actually quite seriously want to follow this, to do something with music, but I haven't thought it through enough, because I'm not sure. I'm torn now between Rishi's pop indie ideas and Shash's classical, or also I think the Poetry School have done sort of some sound text sort of mashup courses, where you just sort of play with different samples of real life sounds, and just how that works with your poems, or with words in general. So I think there's a lot to be gained from collaboration in that vein, and I would absolutely love, I haven't given it enough thought, but the film poems are always so inspiring. Rushika, I really enjoyed yours. So
that was gorgeous.
What about you, Gita?
Oh, yeah. Well, I was going to say, no one said this yet, but a long time ago, when I was very, very young, I did do Indian classical dance. And I've always loved the idea of collaborating with a dancer, because all the kind of mudras and the hand signs are really beautiful. And I was thinking it would be fabulous to be able to read a poem and have a dancer on stage interpreting your poem in their own way at the same time. So that's my dream. So any Indian classical dancers out there, because I definitely couldn't do it now, I'll get in touch if you'd like to. So Anita, I don't know if you can join from where you are. Are you able to just unmute yourself and answer the question? I'll give her a minute, because she's down in the wilds of Sussex. Okay, somebody in the comments, Dave from Birkbeck, hello. So Dave has just said that an animated film of Saffron Jack. Oh my goodness, what a brilliant idea. I can envisage, the beginning of the Monty Python credit.
I mean Gerald Scarfe.
Fantastic.
I mean, that
That's a
would definitely
brilliant
sort of
idea.
channeling the beginning of The Wall. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Does anyone know anyone in Pink Floyd? I'm sure they've got a bit of change knocking about. Surely.
Yeah. I'm going to have a word with you about this because I don't know anyone in Pink Floyd, but I do know a couple of animation people. So we should try and think about that. I don't think Anita can join us from where she is. So I'm going to go on to another question just to finish up. And this is a quote actually from a poet, an American South Asian poet called Divya Victor, whose latest book is called Curb. And her premise, she said this in an interview actually, but it really struck me. And she says, like all animals that echolocate, i.e. bats and other animals that have sonar, writers who compose from and into diaspora are always measuring their distance and displacement, but from a roving, shifting origin. And I just wondered, perhaps if you could start. Sorry, I'm not sure what the background is here. It's definitely not me. Maybe is it your mic that's picking up? I'm not sure. But Shash, because your work obviously does engage with diaspora so beautifully, can you tell me how you feel about that? Do you feel a growing distance? Do you feel a growing closeness? Do you feel that in this digital age, it doesn't matter where you are physically, because your emotional and psychic closeness remains even at that distance? Yes, Shash, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I couldn't really hear your quote very well, but I think I've got it from what you said at the end. This past year has been really good for me because I've connected with so many people across the world, especially poets in Sri Lanka who, I didn't know before because we had to really. So in a way, yeah, the distance thing doesn't seem as great. At the same time, I have noticed how we're so different. And maybe it's because I'm not going back there and entering that world. Because when you do, you take on aspects of that world and you change yourself. Because I'm here, I'm noticing the differences more. But either way, it's been such an enriching experience to get to know people, both in the East and over in North America as well. So yeah, I'm up for more of this.
That's really interesting. I mean, I felt the same actually. I wanted to ask Sarala actually, because you spoke about your journey and your trip that you had made specifically to do some work around your book. How was that experience for you? And did you feel it fed into your poetry in the way you expected or in an unexpected way?
Good question. Thanks, Gita. I would say probably the first thing is that it fed into my poetry over time. So I think the idea was to go out there and write lots of poems and come back having finished a book. It's taken me a lot longer. I think that's to do with my process. And I think obviously interviewing people and sort of acquiring a lot of new information, it's taken me time to then filter it through and actually transform it into poetry as opposed to a verbatim interview. So but it was, I think I didn't really know what to expect. It was the first time I'd had a grant to do it, so while I had tentatively tried to do these things before, I definitely had a vision, I had a plan, and I tried to stick to my plan. But I didn't really know what to expect, so it was a wonderful experience. But yeah, I think the main thing is that it took a lot longer than I think I was expecting.
Thank you. And either Rushika or Rishi, would you like to, I'll just summarize the quote again, because I know there was a lot of background noise, but Divya Victor says that for a diasporic writer, you know, she draws a parallel with animals that echolocate, like a bat, that you're always measuring your distance and your displacement from this origin, but the origin is also itself always moving, changing and evolving. So do you feel that feeds into either of your work at all, or do you just you know, not think about that and write from a different place? Rush, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. I think that's such a beautiful quote, and for me it's really resonant. I think that I'm just, as a writer, I'm just starting to explore that distance in my writing, and that work in progress that I shared with you earlier, which is sort of located between a sort of a Welsh country cottage and thoughts of Sri Lanka, and also sort of like having another generation growing up in being digital natives, sort of threaded through. I'm sort of trying to explore it through hybrid processes, because I do think it is a type of hybridity, although that, you know, I think I much prefer the idea of echolocation and the distance and the changing target as being a description. So yeah, I find that really resonant. I need to get that quote from you so I can look at it again.
I will do, and I
meditate on it a bit.
Yeah, her book is fabulous as well. Rishi, would you like to contribute?
I think echolocation is a very interesting way of describing it, but for me, you know, my angle of attack is slightly different, because my connection back to India is very, very weak, minimal, if not non-existent. So it's not a large part of my concerns or writing process at all. And so it sort of feels like it almost all of it, you know, that was on my mind went into Saffron Jack. And actually, when you look at the bulk of the book, the echolocation is actually around Britain's conception of itself and Britain's conception of how it deals with post-imperial fallout, and what actually Britain's duty of care might be to people of different diasporic backgrounds, and how do you actually, you know, make allowances for, how do you actually start to accommodate people who are British but don't look British in a certain particular imagining and conception of what the nation is. So, you know, so it's almost, you know, what happens when you bring the diaspora home, as it were. And yeah, there's and I think there's a lot to be, it feels like there's a lot to be mined just in actually you know, passing that as much as anything else. I think a lot about the fact that, you know, when Windrush generation, you know, landed, and when they arrived, they didn't think they were going anywhere alien. They thought they were coming home. They were coming to the motherland. So what does diaspora mean in that context, if you're, you know, if you're actually, you know, coming home? And so I like the way the extent, or the way that starts to mess up what people sort of traditionally think of this us and them, near and distant relationship, and it actually forces you to actually confront some things around who is actually holding citizenship, who is defining citizenship, and things like that, which, you know, sometimes just, yeah, going on the basis of just, oh, right now, yeah, Dominions are now independent, so therefore we don't have to think about so hard about it. I like messing that up a bit.
Yeah, and I think that's just an incredibly interesting angle that you've taken on that with Saffron Jack, you know, interrogating what I think it's Paul Gilroy who calls it the post-colonial melancholia, you know, of a kind of post-empire British society, which is something that's kind of been buried, but you're excavating, you know, really beautifully and actually painfully there, I would say, with your book, which is wonderful.
I mean, there is absolutely, there is absolutely a steal from Gilroy in the book as one of the central images and motifs. So, you know, when you come to read that, yeah, you know that that's where it was stolen from completely.
Yeah, he's such a great thinker. Well, I think we're kind of at 7 o'clock now, and if we don't have any other questions, we could probably call it a night there, and you can all go off and get on with your lives. But thank you so much for coming and doing those absolutely stunning readings. You know, it's just fabulous to just look at the screen and see all this incredible talent that we have here, you know, as kind of South Asian diasporic British poets who are just really making their mark and, you know, writing in a way that is so interesting for everyone, I think, to read. So I would just like to thank again Ruby and all the South Asian Heritage Month team, particularly Natasha, who curates the literary events. Thank you very, very much. And there are loads of other great events, so please, all of you, do have a look at the programme and see if there's anything that you want to join. Thank you very much, Ruby. I think we can end there.